Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. My name is Avery Callahan. I'm 17 years old. 3 months ago, my stepmother sat me down at the kitchen table, folded her hands like she was doing me a favor, and told me to sign over the $400,000 my dead mother left me. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, shoulders set, and said, "She's your family now. Your mother would have wanted this." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I said nothing. The next morning, I handed them a sealed envelope from my mom's lawyer. What was inside that envelope made my father cry for the first time in his life. Not because of the money, because of what my mother wrote about him. Words she'd kept sealed for years, waiting for the exact moment he'd need to hear them. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Now, let me take you back 6 months, to the day my mother closed her eyes for the last time. My mother died on a Tuesday. The sun was out. I remember hating it for that. How dare the sky be that blue? How dare the birds keep singing like nothing in the world had changed, when every single thing had just collapsed. Her name was Claire Callahan. She was 43 years old, a 4th grade teacher at Millbrook Elementary for 16 years. The kind of teacher who stayed late cutting construction paper snowflakes at 9 o'clock at night. The kind of teacher who quietly bought winter coats for kids whose parents couldn't. The kind of woman who never once let you see her struggling, even when the struggle was eating her alive. She taught me to read before kindergarten. She taught me to write thank you cards by hand, in cursive with meaning. She taught me that silence is sometimes the loudest thing you can say. The cancer came 2 years before that Tuesday. Lung cancer. Stage 3. She never smoked a day in her life. Not one cigarette, not one occasion, nothing. The doctor said it just happens sometimes. She looked at him for a long moment and said, "Then we deal with it." And she did. Oh, she did. For 23 months, she dealt with it without a single word of complaint. Chemo on Thursdays. Teaching on Mondays through Wednesdays. Grading papers on her hospital bed with an 4 drip in her left arm and a red pen in her right hand. Circling spelling mistakes and writing little encouraging notes in the margins for children who would never know what it cost her to hold that pen. I'd sit beside her doing my homework, pretending I couldn't hear the machines beeping. Pretending everything was normal. Pretending so hard my chest hurt from the effort of it. The last week she could barely speak. Her voice had gone soft and thin like tissue paper. But she pulled me close, her hand so fragile I could feel every single bone. And she whispered something I didn't fully understand at the time. "Everything you need is with Drayton. Promise me you'll call her." I didn't know who Drayton was. I didn't know what everything meant. I just held her hand and said, "I promise, Mom." She smiled. Small. Tired. Perfect. And then on a Tuesday afternoon in October, with the sunlight pouring through the hospital window like it had absolutely no respect for what was happening in that room, she let go. I was the only one there. My father hadn't visited once in 2 years. Not when she was diagnosed. Not when she lost her hair in fistfuls in the shower and cried for the first and only time I ever saw her cry. Not when she sold our house to pay the medical deductibles and moved us into a small rental that smelled like someone else's cooking. Not once. The nurses cried more than I did. Mrs. Patterson from across the street brought flowers to a room that no longer needed them. My Aunt June drove 3 hours from Copperfield and held me in the hospital hallway while I shook so hard my teeth rattled. My father sent a text the next day. One single text. "Sorry for your loss." Like I was a coworker. Like she was someone he'd bumped into at a party once. Like 17 years of marriage and a daughter and a whole life built together had been reduced to 5 words on a phone screen. That part matters. You'll see why. The funeral was small. Mom's friends from school, a few neighbors, my Aunt June, my mom's younger sister, and me. My father showed up 20 minutes late wearing a tie I'd never seen before. He brought Sandra Whitmore, his wife of 6 years. The woman he married 14 months after walking out on my mother and me. Just 14 months. I counted. Sandra wore a black dress and an expression that said she'd rather be at a spa. She didn't sign the guest book. Here's what you need to understand about me at 17. I had nowhere to go. In the state of Virginia, a minor needs a legal guardian. My Aunt June applied. The court said no. My biological father had priority. Daniel Callahan, 45, employed, married, owner of a 3-bedroom house in Grover. So I packed 2 suitcases and moved in with a man I'd barely spoken to in 8 years. The house was already full. Daniel and Sandra had the master bedroom. Brianna, Sandra's daughter, 16, had the second. Tyler, Sandra's son, 14, had the third. My room was a converted storage space at the end of the hall. A camp cot, a folding table, a bare bulb overhead. My suitcases didn't fit, so I stacked them in the corner and sat on the cot listening to Tyler's video game bleed through the wall. That first night I heard Sandra in the kitchen. She wasn't talking to my father. She was talking about me. How long until the trust thing gets sorted? My father said something I couldn't make out. Then Sandra. She's been here 2 days and she already acts like she owns the place. I pulled my mother's blanket around my shoulders. I didn't cry. I just memorized the sentence. People tell you who they are early. You should always believe them. One week in, Sandra made chicken casserole and served everyone before me. I didn't say a word. I ate what was left cold in the dish and washed my own plate. Halfway through the meal, Sandra started talking about money. She didn't look at me. She looked at Daniel. Brianna's first-choice school costs $55,000 a year. The roof is leaking again. The Honda needs a transmission. My visa bill, don't even get me started. Daniel chewed slowly. Then he turned to me. His voice was careful. Rehearsed. Your mom, she left you some money, right? We should probably talk about that. As a family. I set my fork down. It's in a trust. I don't have access yet. Sandra leaned forward. Trusts can be changed. We looked it up. She said we. That word landed somewhere cold in my chest, because that meant this wasn't a dinner conversation. It was a coordinated ask. They'd been discussing it, maybe for days, maybe since before I moved in, maybe since the funeral when they'd stood at the back of the room not speaking to anyone and left before the flowers wilted. I picked up my plate, walked to the sink, rinsed it, dried it, and put it away. Morgan, Daniel said. Except that's not my name, is it? We're talking to you. I heard you, I said. I just don't have anything else to say. I went to my room, sat on the cot, and opened the small wooden box I'd brought from Mom's house. Inside, her reading glasses, a birthday card she'd written me when I turned 15, and a folded piece of paper with a phone number, the name beside it in my mother's handwriting. Patricia Drayton, Esquire. I didn't call that night. I didn't know yet how bad things would get. But I ran my thumb over the ink and thought, Mom, what did you know that I don't? Turns out she knew everything. 2 weeks later, I came downstairs for breakfast and found a stack of papers on the kitchen table. The top page was highlighted in yellow. The header read, Petition for Guardianship of a Minor's Estate, Commonwealth of Virginia. Sandra was pouring coffee. She didn't look up. I picked up the papers. Read the first paragraph. Read it again. Daniel walked in dressed for work. He saw me holding the petition and cleared his throat. It's just paperwork. Standard stuff. If I'm your legal guardian, I should have a say in your finances. It's for your own good, Avery. You want to control Mom's trust? I want to protect you. He grabbed his keys. You're 17. You don't understand how money works. Mom understood, I said. That's why she set it up. He left for work. Sandra sipped her coffee and smiled at me over the rim of her mug. It was the kind of smile that said this is already decided. The kind that makes your skin feel wrong. I went to the library after school. Not for my shift. For the back room where it's quiet and the Wi-Fi works and nobody asks you for anything. I sat in the corner and called the one person I hadn't been able to face since the funeral. Aunt June picked up on the first ring. Honey, I've been waiting for this call. They're filing for guardianship of Mom's estate. My voice cracked. First time since the funeral. Something about hearing her voice on the other end just broke something loose. June was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, can you get to my place Saturday? Yes. Good. There's someone you need to meet. Her name is Patricia Drayton. Your mother's attorney. My chest loosened for the first time in weeks. My mother had whispered a name from her deathbed. And now that name was becoming real. Because here is what I know now that I didn't know then. My mother wasn't just a 4th grade teacher with a red pen and a kind heart. She was a woman who looked at the worst possible future and said, "Not my daughter, not on my watch," and she spent the last year of her life making sure of it. Every Thursday with the chemo in her arm, every Wednesday grading papers, every sleepless night in that rental that smelled like someone else's cooking, she was building something. Quietly, carefully, the way she did everything. A fortress. And I was about to find out just how strong she had built it. Don't go anywhere. Because what happened when I walked into that lawyer's office on that Saturday morning is something that changed absolutely everything. And the sealed envelope, the one my mother wrote and left instructions to open only at the right moment, I'll tell you what was inside it, every single word. Stay with me. Patricia Drayton's office sat above a hardware store on Main Street in Copperfield. Small town, small building, small sign in the window. But the woman behind that desk was anything but small. She was 58 years old, silver-haired, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she looked at me the way a person looks at someone they have been expecting for a very long time. Not with pity, with recognition. "Sit down, Avery. Your mother told me a great deal about you." Aunt June sat beside me. Drayton opened a folder. Thick, tabbed, organized with the kind of precision that only comes from someone who has been waiting for the right moment. "Your mother established an irrevocable trust 18 months before she passed. She named me as trustee. You are the sole beneficiary." She paused. "Do you understand what irrevocable means? It can't be changed. Correct? Not by your father, not by his wife, not by any court petition for guardianship. Because the trust already has a designated trustee. Me." I exhaled so slowly I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for weeks. The trust held $400,000. $250,000 from Mom's life insurance. $95,000 from her savings. $55,000 from the sale of our house. The house she'd sold 6 months before she died, and I'd thought she was downsizing because of medical bills. I understood now. She wasn't downsizing. She was building a wall. Drayton reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy paper. My mother's handwriting on the front. "For Daniel when the time comes." "Your mother gave me this with specific instructions," Drayton said. "She asked that you deliver it to your father. But only when the moment is right. She said you would know when." I held the envelope. It felt warm in my hands, like it had been sitting in sunlight, patient and waiting. "Your mother didn't hope for the best, Avery. She planned for the worst. And she was right." I came home that evening and found my things in the garage. Not all of them. Just the personal ones. The box of Mom's photographs. Her favorite coffee mug with the chipped handle she refused to throw out because I'd given it to her for Mother's Day when I was 9. My journal. The bracelet she wore every single day for 20 years. A thin silver chain with a tiny locket. All of it stuffed into a black trash bag sitting on the concrete floor next to a bag of lawn clippings. I stood in the doorway holding the bag. The plastic cold in my fist. "Where's my stuff?" Sandra didn't look up from the laundry she was folding. "We needed the space. Tyler needs a gaming room. This is my mother's jewelry. Her photos. And this is my house. You're living here rent-free. The least you can do is not take up space." I opened the bag. Found the bracelet tangled in a scarf. The locket was open. Inside, a photo of me at age 4 sitting on Mom's lap, both of us laughing. The photo was damp. Something had leaked on it. I closed the locket. Put the bracelet on my wrist. Felt the clasp click into place like a door locking. "You can take my room," I said, and my voice was very, very steady. "You can take my chair at the table. But you don't get to throw my mother in the trash." Sandra looked at me for the first time. Something moved across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or the recognition that she'd finally found the line she shouldn't have crossed. She went back to her folding. Tyler walked past the garage on his way to the kitchen and slowed down when he saw me kneeling on the concrete, sorting through the bag. He didn't say anything. Even he knew, I think, that this particular moment wasn't funny. That night I spread the photographs on my camp cot and sorted the water-damaged ones from the ones that survived. 11 photos were ruined. Edges curled. Colors bleeding into each other like watercolors in the rain. The rest I sealed in a gallon Ziploc bag and hid inside my suitcase. I wore the bracelet from that night forward. Slept in it. Showered in it. I wasn't taking it off until I was somewhere safe. I texted Aunt June. They threw out Mom's things. I need to get out of here. June replied in 30 seconds. 7 months, honey. You turn 18 in 7 months. We'll get you through this. 7 months. I started counting the days like a prisoner scratching marks into a wall. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening. Daniel called me into the living room after dinner. Sandra was on the couch, arms crossed, legs crossed, jaw set. She'd been building to this all day. I could feel it the way you feel a storm coming, the air going still and wrong. Sit down, Avery. I sat. We need that money, Daniel said. His voice was tight with something between desperation and entitlement, and that combination is a very ugly thing to see on a person's face. Brianna's college, the roof. Sandra has been carrying this family on her back, and we are drowning. That money isn't mine to give. It's in a trust. It's your trust. You can talk to the lawyer. Tell her to release it. No. Sandra uncrossed her arms. Your mother wouldn't want you to be this selfish. I looked at her. Then at my father. You don't get to tell me what Mom wanted. You left her. The room went very, very still. Daniel's face changed. Not anger exactly. Something older. Shame dressed up as authority, and it is a costume that doesn't fit right if you know what to look for. I'm still your father. Then act like one. Silence. 10 seconds. 15. Sandra broke it. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. No respect, no gratitude. We feed her, house her, and she sits there like a little queen on a pile of money. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up, his eyes had gone hard. If you can't be part of this family, Avery, maybe this isn't the right home for you. There it was. The threat they'd been saving like a poker chip. Cooperate or we throw you out. A 17-year-old girl with nowhere to go. I stood up. My hands were trembling, but I kept them still at my sides. You left Mom when she was healthy. You didn't come back when she was dying. And now you want her money. I walked to my room and closed the door quietly, the way my mother would have. The phone campaign started the next day. Sandra called Daniel's mother Grandma Rose. Then Aunt Lisa, Daniel's older sister. Then Uncle Carter, his younger brother. She told each of them a version of the same story. Avery is sitting on a fortune while the family struggles. She refuses to help. She's ungrateful. She's turning into her mother. That last part was meant as an insult. It was the greatest compliment anyone had ever given me. Grandma Rose called first. Avery, your father is feeding you and putting a roof over your head. The least you can do is help out. Hi, Grandma. The money is in a trust. I legally cannot access it. Then untrust it. Talk to the lawyer. That's not how it works. Your mother raised you better than this. She'd be ashamed. I held the phone away from my ear and let the words drift past like smoke. Then I said, I love you, Grandma. I have to go. Aunt Lisa texted. Don't be that kid, Avery. Family helps family. I didn't respond. Uncle Carter didn't call. Didn't text. That struck me as strange. Everyone else had weighed in, advised, pressured, judged. Carter stayed completely silent. I didn't understand yet that his silence was a message of its own kind. I started spending my afternoons at the library, not just for my shelving shifts but for the quiet. The back room had a table by the window where no one bothered me, and the afternoon light came in gold and low and gentle. Mrs. Cooper, the head librarian, had known my mother. They'd worked together on the elementary school reading program. She never asked questions. She just left the back room unlocked after hours and pretended she didn't notice I was still there long past closing. I'd sit at that table doing homework, watching the parking lot empty out car by car, listening to the building settle around me. Sometimes I'd write in my journal new entries, because the old ones were half destroyed from the water. I wrote letters to Mom that I'd never send, telling her about Sandra and the kitchen table and Grandma Rose on the phone. I wrote them like she could read them. Maybe she could. That library was the only place where nobody asked me for anything. Nobody told me I owed them. Nobody invoked my dead mother's name to justify taking what she'd left behind. Tyler made it personal. He was 14, built like his mother's temper. He'd already taken my charger twice, borrowed my headphones without asking, and changed the Wi-Fi password. I bought a new charger. Let the headphones go. Asked Brianna for the password. But the journal was different. I came home from the library and found it on the kitchen counter, pages splayed open and soaking wet. A glass of water had been tipped right onto the pages where I'd written letters to Mom. Letters I'd written in the dark on my camp cot saying the things I couldn't say out loud. Tyler was at the table eating chips. "Oops," he said. He didn't look up. I picked up the journal and peeled the wet pages apart one by one. Some of the ink had bled into nothing. Some of the words were simply gone, erased like they'd never existed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I took the journal to my room, photographed every surviving page with my phone, and saved them all to a cloud folder. Then I put the journal in a Ziploc bag inside my suitcase. That evening, Tyler had friends over in the living room. As I walked through to the kitchen, he pointed at me. "That's our Charity case. Her mom died and now she lives in the closet." His friends laughed. I kept walking. Later, I was in my room with the door cracked when I heard a soft knock. Brianna stood in the hallway with her arms wrapped around herself, looking like she was carrying something heavy. "I'm sorry about Tyler," she whispered. "He's a jerk. It's not your fault." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded and slipped away. My mother survived 23 months of chemotherapy without complaining once. I could survive a 14-year-old with a water glass. I found the proof on a Monday morning in the junk drawer. I was looking for a pen. The drawer was full of the usual chaos: takeout menus, dead batteries, rubber bands, coupons 3 years expired. And then tucked beneath a stack of takeout menus, a letter from First National Trust Services, addressed to the office of Patricia Drayton. A copy sent to the household as standard procedure for any inquiry related to a minor's protected account. The letter stated that a request had been received from Sandra Callahan, legal guardian of Avery Callahan, asking for a full account summary and withdrawal procedures for the trust. The request had been denied. Sandra had called the bank. She had identified herself as my legal guardian. She had tried to access my mother's trust. My hands didn't shake. I felt something colder than anger move through me. Clarity. Cold, clean, absolute clarity. I photographed the letter with my phone. Both sides. The envelope too, with the postmark and the address. Then I put it back in the drawer exactly where I'd found it. That evening I emailed the photos to Miss Drayton with one line. She called the bank pretending to be my guardian. Drayton responded within the hour. "This is exactly what your mother anticipated. I've documented everything. Keep the original in the drawer. Don't let them know you've seen it." Then a second message. "I'm arranging a meeting. Daniel and his wife need to hear the legal reality directly from me. It's time." I put down my phone and looked out the window. Sandra was in the backyard laughing at something on her phone, completely unaware of what she had set in motion. My mother had anticipated this exact move. She had written instructions for it. Every single step, planned from a hospital bed with an 4 in her arm, months before she died, because she knew. She always knew. Don't move yet. Because in the next part the meeting happens. The sealed envelope gets opened. And my father, for the first and only time in his life, breaks down completely. You are not going to want to miss what my mother wrote in that letter. The Sunday dinner at Grandma Rose's house was Sandra's grand performance, and she'd been rehearsing for it. Everyone was there. Rose at the head of the table, Aunt Lisa and her husband Gary, Uncle Carter, quiet as always in the corner, Daniel, Sandra, Brianna, Tyler and me, sitting in the chair closest to the door. I'd learned to always sit closest to the door. The meal was pot roast and potatoes. The small talk lasted exactly 12 minutes before Sandra set her fork down, pressed a tissue to the corner of her eye, and began. "I've tried so hard." Her voice cracked right on cue. Grandma Rose looked up. Aunt Lisa tilted her head. "I've opened my home to Avery. I've treated her like my own. But she refuses to be part of this family. She's sitting on money her dead mother left while we struggle to put food on the table. Daniel works 60 hours a week. I gave up my career for these kids. And Avery won't even help with college for Brianna." Grandma Rose set down her knife. "Avery, your father has done everything for you. Don't you think it's time to give back?" I held my fork. Mom's bracelet pressed against the inside of my wrist. Aunt Lisa leaned in. "Claire would have wanted you to help your siblings. They're your siblings now." Not one person at that table had been to my mother's funeral. Not Rose, not Lisa, not Carter. They hadn't sent flowers. They hadn't called the hospital. They'd never once visited the rental house where Mom and I had lived, where she graded papers with an 4 in her arm and pretended she wasn't afraid. And now they were sitting at a dinner table with pot roast going cold on their plates, telling me what my mother would have wanted. I looked around the table. A family portrait hung on the wall behind Rose. Daniel at 12, Lisa at 15, Carter at 8. There was no picture of me anywhere in that house. I'd never been to this house before 3 months ago. Sandra dabbed her tissue and looked at me with an expression of wounded nobility. Daniel studied his plate. Brianna stared at the salt shaker. Tyler was texting under the table, which told you everything you needed to know about how guilty he felt. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say a single word, a voice came from the far end of the table. Uncle Carter, who hadn't said one word all evening, set down his glass carefully. Has anyone at this table actually seen the trust documents? The room went completely silent. Sandra's tissue froze against her cheek. Rose's fork hovered in the air. Daniel looked at his brother the way you look at someone who has just pulled a fire alarm in a building you were trying to burn down. Because I have some questions, Carter continued very calmly, and I think we should have answers before we start telling a 17-year-old girl what to do with her dead mother's estate. Nobody responded. Not one person said a word. The clock in the hallway ticked 5 times before Rose cleared her throat and changed the subject to Lisa's bathroom renovation. But the damage was done. A crack had split right through Sandra's performance, and everyone around that table felt it, even if they couldn't name it. Carter found me in the driveway after dinner. I was leaning against June's car, waiting for the ride I'd arranged in advance. I'd learned. Always have an exit plan. Avery. Hold on. Carter was 40 years old, the youngest of the 3 Callahan siblings. He worked as an accountant in Fredericksburg. He was always the quiet one. The one who showed up, ate his meal and left without drama. I barely knew him. I don't know exactly what your mom set up, he said, hands deep in his jacket pockets. But I know trusts. If it's irrevocable with an independent trustee, they cannot touch it. No petition, no guardianship filing, nothing. I watched his face carefully. Why are you telling me this? He looked back at the house. Through the kitchen window I could see Sandra gesturing while Rose nodded along. Because Daniel called me last week. He asked me to help him find a way into the trust. Wanted me to look at the structure, find a loophole. What did you say? He met my eyes. I said no. Then after a pause, your brother, my brother, asked me to help him take his daughter's inheritance. I told him no. That's not who we are. I nodded. My throat had gone very tight. If your mom had a lawyer, use that lawyer. And don't sign anything. Not one single page. Nothing. I won't. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, quick and a little awkward, the way people do when they want to say something bigger than words will hold. Then he walked to his truck and drove away. I stood in that driveway for a long time after his taillights disappeared. One person in that entire family had said no. Sometimes one is enough. Sometimes one is everything. Sandra played her last card on a Wednesday afternoon. I was doing homework at the folding table in my room when Brianna knocked. She stood in the doorway looking like she'd genuinely rather be anywhere else on earth. Can I talk to you? Sure. She sat on the edge of my cot, hands clasped between her knees, not looking at me. My mom says. She stopped. Started again. Avery, if you don't share the money, I can't go to college. I'll have to work at the diner. Is that what you want? The words were rehearsed. I could practically hear Sandra feeding them from the hallway. Brianna, that's not your fault. And it's not mine either. Her eyes filled up. I know. She told me to say it. I know she did. Brianna wiped her face and left without another word. Her bedroom door closed softly. 30 seconds later, Sandra appeared in the doorway. She'd been listening the whole time. Her face was triumphant and furious simultaneously. See what you've done? You made her cry. You're heartless. You're just as cold as your mother. I stood up. The room was small. Sandra filled the doorway. But I looked straight at her. And something in my face, some stillness I'd learned from the woman Sandra had just insulted, made Sandra take half a step backward. Don't ever talk about my mother again. Sandra's lip curled. Or what? You'll find out. Tuesday. She stared at me. I stared back. After 5 full seconds she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharp and fast down the hallway. Tuesday was the day Drayton had scheduled the meeting. Sandra didn't know that yet. She called my mother cold. My mother, who spent her dying year planning a fortress so her daughter would never be alone in the dark. Cold. Let me tell you what cold really looks like. Is walking out on your wife when she's healthy, never once coming back when she's dying, and then sending a 5-word text when she's gone. Cold is what I was about to watch drain out of 2 people's faces in a law office in Copperfield on a Tuesday morning. Tuesday, 10 in the morning. The law office of Patricia Drayton, Main Street, Copperfield. I arrived with Aunt June at 9:45. Drayton met us in the hallway. Charcoal blazer. Reading glasses on. The expression of a woman who had been waiting 18 months to have this exact conversation. Are you ready? Yes. Good. Let me do the talking until I tell you otherwise. Daniel and Sandra arrived at 10 sharp. Sandra had dressed for the occasion. Press blouse, gold earrings, lipstick. She carried a manila folder thick with papers she printed from the internet, and she walked into that room like she was arriving at a business deal she expected to win. Daniel looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. He was sweating through his shirt. He kept touching his collar like it was choking him. He shook Drayton's hand at the door and said, "Thank you for meeting with us," like a man arriving at a job interview he knew in his bones he wasn't going to pass. The conference room was modest. Oak table for chairs aside, a window looking out onto the street. A water pitcher sat in the center. Nobody poured a glass. Drayton's file folder, thick, tabbed, held together with a binder clip, sat in front of her like an unopened verdict. Sandra chose the seat directly across from Drayton, set her manila folder on the table, and placed both hands on top of it. A power move. She'd probably practiced it in the bathroom mirror. June and I sat on the opposite side. June was calm. I was calm. We'd both arrived knowing something Daniel and Sandra did not. This meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a notification. Drayton sat at the head of the table. She arranged her file folder, the real one, the one Claire had built piece by piece in the last year of her life, and looked at each of us in turn. Thank you all for coming. I called this meeting because there appears to be ongoing confusion about the estate of Claire Callahan. I'd like to resolve that confusion. Today. Clearly and permanently. Sandra smiled the confident smile of someone who thinks they've come armed. Daniel licked his lips. June squeezed my hand under the table. Drayton opened the folder. Claire Callahan established an irrevocable trust. The trust names me, Patricia Drayton, as sole trustee. The sole beneficiary is Avery Claire Callahan. The trust contains $400,000 in combined assets. She turned a page without hurrying. The distribution schedule is as follows. $50,000 released for educational expenses when the beneficiary turns 18. Additional distributions at ages 21 and 25. All disbursements require trustee approval. Sandra leaned forward. But Daniel is her father. He has parental rights. Drayton looked at her the way you'd look at someone who has just tried to argue with gravity. Parental rights do not extend to an irrevocable trust established by a third party. Mr. Callahan is not the grantor, not the trustee, and not a beneficiary. He has no legal standing here. None. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Claire never told me about this. She wasn't required to. Sandra's folder was still closed on the table. Her grip on its edges had tightened. Then we'll get a lawyer. We'll contest this. You're welcome to retain counsel. Drayton's voice didn't rise. It never needed to. But I should mention something first. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. This office received correspondence from First National Trust Services. It documents an unauthorized attempt to access Avery's trust account. The caller identified herself as. Drayton read directly from the page. Sandra Callahan, legal guardian of Avery Callahan. Sandra's face drained of every drop of color. The manila folder in her hands, full of internet printouts and homemade arguments she'd been so confident about an hour ago, suddenly looked very small. Daniel turned and looked at his wife. His mouth was slightly open. It was the first genuine surprise I had seen on his face in months. "You called the bank," he said. Sandra didn't answer him. Impersonating a legal guardian to access a minor's protected trust is a serious matter, Drayton said. Potentially a federal one. "I trust this will not happen again." Sandra's hand moved to her throat. She touched her earring, a nervous gesture I'd watched her make a dozen times at the kitchen table. But never like this. Never with that expression on her face. The expression of someone who had walked into a room expecting to win and was realizing in real time that the door had locked behind her. Daniel leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. The petition for guardianship, the conversations with Carter, the Sunday dinner campaign, all of it, every move they'd made, had been anticipated months in advance by a woman who had been dead for 6 months. A woman grading papers with a red pen and an A4 in her arm. A woman who had quietly, methodically, lovingly built a wall that no one was getting through. And Drayton wasn't done. "There is one additional item." She reached into the folder and withdrew the cream-colored envelope. The one she'd given me weeks ago. The one I'd returned to her that morning because this, right now, was the moment. Claire left a letter. Addressed to Daniel. She asked me to read it aloud in your presence at the appropriate time. Drayton looked at me. I nodded. Daniel pushed back from the table. "I don't need to hear." "Mom asked for this," I said. My voice was quiet but very steady. "Please." He looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time since I had moved into that converted storage room at the end of his hallway. Then he settled back into his chair, folded his hands on the table, and went still. Drayton opened the envelope, unfolded the letter, and read. "Daniel, if you're hearing this, then what I expected has happened. I'm gone, and someone in your life is trying to take what I left for our daughter." Sandra's jaw tightened. Daniel didn't move. "I want you to know I don't hate you. I don't write this with anger. I write it with clarity. I know you, Daniel. I've always known you. You're not a bad man. You're a weak one. And weakness left unchecked does the same damage as cruelty." Daniel's eyes went red. His hands gripped the edge of the table like he needed something to hold on to. "I know you'll remarry. I know whoever you choose will look at what I built and see an opportunity. And I know you'll convince yourself that sharing is the right thing, because it's easier than fighting for your daughter. It was always easier for you to agree than to stand. I used to think that was kindness. Now I know it's just another word for cowardice." The parking lot was empty except for 3 cars. Daniel sat in his truck with the engine off, both hands on the steering wheel, staring at a fixed point somewhere beyond the windshield. I walked over, opened the passenger door, sat down. We didn't speak for a full minute. The truck smelled like coffee and work gloves and a pine air freshener that had long since dried out and gone scentless, which somehow fit everything about this moment perfectly. "I didn't know she wrote that," he said finally. His voice was wrecked. "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't think she'd actually say it." He flinched. Small, barely visible, but I saw it. "I'm not going to fight you, Dad." I kept my voice completely even. "But I'm not giving you Mom's money either. It's not mine to give. She put it in trust for a reason. She knew you'd ask, and she made it so the answer would always be no, even if I was too scared to say it myself." He stared through the windshield. His knuckles were pale against the wheel. "I'll stay in your house until I turn 18. 7 months. I'll be respectful. I'll clean up after myself. I won't cause problems. But I need you to understand something. I'm leaving the day I turn 18. And I'm not coming back." His voice was quiet. "Where will you go? That's not your problem anymore. You made sure of that a long time ago." I opened the door and stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath my sneakers, and the sound was somehow very final. "Avery." I stopped. "Your mother was." He paused. Swallowed. "She was always the stronger one." "I know," I said. I closed the truck door and walked across the parking lot to June's car. I didn't look back. I could feel his eyes on me the whole way, but I didn't turn around, not once. "You had 8 years to be my father. She had 2 years left and she used every single day of them." Drayton moved fast. By the end of that week, Daniel and Sandra each received a certified letter from her office. The language was formal and precise. The message was simple. All communication regarding the Claire Callahan Trust must be directed through the trustee. Any attempt to contact Avery about financial matters directly, through family members or through third parties, would be documented and reported. A separate letter went to Sandra specifically. It included a copy of the bank's denial. No further legal action will be taken at this time regarding the unauthorized inquiry. However, this documentation has been filed and preserved. Sandra knew exactly what that meant. One more step and she'd be explaining herself to someone with a badge. The following Saturday, I sat in Drayton's office and signed the beneficiary acknowledgement, a form confirming I understood the trust terms, the distribution schedule, and my rights. $50,000 for education at 18. A second release at 21. The remainder at 25. All managed by Drayton until then. Your mother spent a great deal of time on this, Drayton said, watching me sign. She rewrote the distribution clause 3 times. She wanted to make sure you'd have enough to start, but not so much that you'd stop building. That sounds exactly like her. Drayton smiled. It was brief and real. She also left a note in the file. Not a legal document. Just a sticky note, in her handwriting. She turned the file so I could see it. Tell Avery I'm proud of her, even if she doesn't need to hear it. I pressed my pen against the table. Breathed in. Breathed out. She was wrong about that, I said. I really needed to hear it. The story traveled the way stories do in small towns. Fast, crooked, and without anyone's permission. Carter told the truth first. He called Grandma Rose that same evening and laid it out plainly. The trust was airtight. Sandra had impersonated a legal guardian to access a minor's account. And Daniel had asked Carter to help him find loopholes to break into his own daughter's inheritance. Rose called Daniel that night. I was in my room, but the walls were thin and her voice carried. You let that woman try to steal from your child? I couldn't hear his response. Just the low, steady murmur of a man who had run out of excuses. Aunt Lisa called me the next afternoon. Her tone had changed entirely from the last time we'd spoken. Softer. Smaller. Avery, I owe you an apology. I didn't know the full story. Sandra told us she told us something very different. I'm sorry. Thank you, Aunt Lisa. Your Uncle Carter, he set us all straight. Told us what really happened, the bank, the petition, all of it. He's a good man. Better than his brother, if I'm being honest. A pause. Listen, Avery. Whatever you need. You call me. Okay. By the following Sunday, Sandra was no longer welcome at Rose's dinner table. The invitation went to Daniel alone. He didn't come. He said he had to work. Everyone knew he didn't work Sundays. Rose called me that week. She didn't mention money. She didn't mention the trust. She just asked how school was going and told me she'd saved a piece of her apple cobbler if I ever wanted to stop by. It was the first normal conversation I'd ever had with my grandmother. It shouldn't have taken a legal crisis to get there. But it did. And I took it. The family didn't collapse overnight. It shifted the way a house shifts after a long storm. Cracks in the foundation that had always been there, finally visible in the light. Carter checked in on me by text every couple of weeks. Short messages. How's the library? Need anything? From a man who wasn't used to talking much but was trying to show up in the ways he could manage. I appreciated every single one. The house got quieter after the meeting. Not peaceful. Just emptier. Daniel and Sandra fought behind their bedroom door. I could hear the rhythm of it if not the words. Her voice rising sharp and fast. His dropping slow and flat. The arguments always ended the same way. A door slamming. Then the television going on too loud. One night about 3 weeks after the meeting, I passed the kitchen and heard Sandra on the phone, talking to her own mother. And she wasn't performing anymore. The mask was completely off. He's useless, she said. He can't even get money from his own kid. I married him because I thought he had potential. Turns out his dead wife was the one with the plan. I stood in the hallway without moving. She laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. I should have looked at the finances before the wedding. My mistake. She hung up. I walked back to my room before she could see me. That night I understood something about Sandra that I hadn't before. Daniel wasn't a partner to her. He was an investment that had failed to pay off. She'd done the calculation, And now that the numbers didn't work, she was preparing to cut her losses. Daniel meanwhile retreated entirely. He came home from work, ate in front of the television, went to bed. He stopped asking about the trust. He stopped asking me anything at all. He moved through that house like a man sleepwalking through a life he no longer recognized. Around 11 that night, Brianna knocked on my door. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." She leaned against the doorframe, and in the low light from the hallway she looked very young. "For what it's worth, I think your mom sounds like an amazing person." I looked at this girl who'd been dragged into a mess she hadn't created by a mother she couldn't control, who had come to me twice now with nothing to offer except quiet honesty. "She was," I said. "She really was." Brianna nodded. And for one small gentle moment in that ugly, unhappy house, something kind passed between us. 7 months passed the way hard months do. Slowly on the inside. Fast on the calendar. I kept my head down. Went to school. Worked my library shifts. Studied for the SATs at that back table by the window, and scored a 1,380. Mrs. Cooper told me it was more than enough to make my mother very proud. I applied to Virginia Commonwealth University. I got in. Half scholarship for academic merit. The rest covered by the Trust's education fund. I signed the dorm contract the week I turned 18. Drayton released the first $50,000 on my birthday. I opened my own bank account. My name. My signature. No one else's. The teller asked if I'd like to add a parent or guardian. I said no. The morning I left, I packed the same 2 suitcases I'd arrived with. Plus the wooden box with Mom's things. Plus the journal, dried now. The ink faded in some pages but still readable where it mattered most. Everything I owned fit in 2 bags. That used to make me sad. Now it made me feel light as air. Daniel stood at the front door holding a cup of coffee, looking older than 45. "Avery." I stopped on the front step, suitcase in each hand. "I know I don't have the right to say this, but good luck." I looked at him. My father. The man who had left my mother, who had let his wife try to steal what she'd left me, who had never in 7 months said I'm sorry. Standing in the doorway of a house that was already too big and too quiet for him, holding a cup of coffee he would forget to finish. "Bye, Dad." He opened his mouth. The words were stuck somewhere between his pride and his shame, and neither one would let them go. I walked to June's car, loaded my bags, and got in. June put her hand over mine. "Ready. Ready." She pulled out of the driveway. I watched the house shrink in the side mirror, getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it was gone. I didn't slam any doors. I just closed them quietly, the way my mother would have. Hold on, because there is one more thing I haven't told you yet. The letter that arrived 6 months later. His handwriting on the envelope. 1 page, front only. I'll tell you every word in the next part. And I'll tell you whether I wrote back. Stay with me. My dorm room at VCU was 8 feet by 12 feet. 1 bed. 1 desk. 1 small closet. It was the most beautiful room I had ever seen in my life. I hung Mom's photo on the wall above my desk, the one from my 6th birthday, her arms wrapped around me, both of us laughing at something the camera never caught. I set the wooden box on my nightstand, and I put her bracelet on every morning like a ritual, like a small private ceremony between the 2 of us. College was ordinary in the best way. Classes, dining hall food that was never quite hot enough. A roommate named Tessa who played music too loud and apologized every single time without ever actually turning it down. I declared English as my major because writing was the only thing that had ever made me feel genuinely close to Mom. And she had always said the world needed more people who could tell the truth clearly. I joined the campus literary magazine. Wrote a personal essay for freshman composition about trust, the legal kind and the human kind. My professor wrote in the margin, "This is publication ready." I didn't submit it anywhere. The story wasn't finished yet. Aunt June drove down from Copperfield once a month with Tupperware containers of food and gossip I hadn't asked for but always appreciated. She'd sit on my dorm bed and tell me stories about Mom as a teenager. How Claire once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring June's forgotten science project to school. How Claire had applied to law school before choosing teaching instead. She would have been a terrifying lawyer, June said once, laughing the kind of laugh that's half crying. But she liked kids more than courtrooms. Drayton sent quarterly trust statements, clean and professional. Each one arrived with a brief handwritten note tucked inside. Investments performing well. No irregularities. Once your mother would be proud of your grades. Drayton never overstepped. She was the trustee, not a surrogate grandmother. But those small notes mattered more than she probably ever knew. And then in November I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "Thank you." It was from Brianna. "Hi Avery. I got into Piedmont Community College. I'm paying my own way. Loans, work study, tips from the diner. I'm not going to lie, it's hard. But I wanted you to know I'm glad you didn't give in. If you had, my mom would have spent that money within a year and I'd still be in the same place. At least this way, I know what I'm earning is mine. Thank you for not caving." I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and looked at Mom's photo on the wall for a long time. Your trust didn't just protect my money, Mom. It protected futures you never even imagined. Futures you never got to see. The letter from my father arrived 6 months after I'd left. Plain white envelope. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Blocky, slightly tilted to the left. His penmanship hadn't changed since the birthday cards he stopped sending when I was 10. I opened it standing in the mailroom of my dorm, next to the recycling bin and a bulletin board covered in flyers for campus events. Not a dramatic setting. But life doesn't arrange itself for the camera. The letter was 1 page. Front only. "Avery, I read your mother's letter again last night. 3rd time this month. She was right about everything. I was weak. I am weak. I let Sandra make decisions that were mine to make, and I let you carry the cost of that. I'm sorry I wasn't the father your mother described. I'm trying to figure out how to be better. I started seeing a counselor. Sandra and I separated in October. She took the kids and moved to her mother's place. The house is very quiet now. Too quiet. I don't expect you to believe any of this. I don't expect you to write back. But I wanted you to know that I finally heard your mother. Too late probably. But I heard her. He signed it, Dad. I stood in that mailroom for a long time. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. A girl from the 3rd floor came in, grabbed a package and left without noticing me. Life has a way of moving around grief like water moving around a rock. Never stopping, never going back, just finding the way through. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry. And not because I didn't believe him. I think I did partly. The counseling, the separation, the rereading of my mother's letter 3 times in a month. Those were the actions of a man who was finally slowly doing the work he should have started a decade ago. But forgiveness isn't something you hand over on demand. It isn't something you owe anyone just because they finally stopped causing damage. Forgiveness is something you grow into slowly, like a garden you plant without knowing when anything will bloom, or even whether it will. I wasn't ready. Maybe I would be next year. Maybe the year after that. Maybe someday I'd sit across from him at a diner and we'd drink coffee and talk about something ordinary and real. Maybe not. I couldn't know yet. I took the letter home, folded it carefully, and placed it inside the wooden box right next to Mom's bracelet and the birthday card she'd written me when I turned 15. I placed it there among the things I was keeping, the things that mattered. I didn't throw it away. That meant something. I just wasn't sure yet what. It's spring now. The trees outside my dorm window are coming back to life the way trees do, slowly and without asking anyone's permission. I'm sitting at my desk. Mom's photo is in front of me. Her bracelet is warm against my wrist. The locket is open. 4-year-old me grins up from her lap, completely unaware of everything that's coming. I close it gently. My mother didn't teach me to fight. She taught me something much harder and much rarer than fighting. She taught me to prepare. She taught me that some battles don't need raised voices or courtrooms, or revenge fantasies that play out in public. They need a woman with a legal pad and a clear head sitting at her sister's kitchen table, building a fortress her daughter won't need for years, because she loves her daughter more than she fears what's coming. If someone in your life tells you that loving your family means handing over what's yours, that is not love. That is control wearing a mask, and it has been wearing that mask for a very long time. You don't owe anyone your inheritance. You don't owe anyone your boundaries. And you absolutely do not owe anyone your silence. My mother couldn't be here to protect me in person, so she put it in writing. She put it in a trust with a lock that couldn't be picked by anyone who hadn't earned it. She put it in a letter that said everything I was too young and too grief-struck to say myself. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. I open my laptop. I start typing. I'm telling this story because my mother can't. And because somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting at a kitchen table being told that family means giving up what they're owed. Being told that love means making yourself smaller. Being told that a dead woman's wishes don't matter anymore. Because she isn't here to defend them. They do matter. She does matter. And so do you. My name is Avery Callahan. I'm 18 years old. I have my mother's bracelet, my mother's trust, and my mother's spine. And for the first time in my life, I am exactly where she wanted me to be.